There are no further points on that. We can move on to public art. How can the link between architecture and public art be strengthened and the quality of that public art improved?
I'm Councillor Gwyneth Hampson and I sit on the public art panel. I think that what should happen is that architects should be brought in earlier. In other words, the public art shouldn't be an add-on, and it particularly should not be a canopy over the front door.
Okay.
We might as well deal with the public art panel now. I'm the chairman of the public art panel, and Gwyneth has referred to one of the examples that I cite, which I detest, to be honest with you. I think it's a very poor show on the part of both developers and architects to consider that a doorway is public art. It is certainly useful for the public to have a good doorway or a canopy over it, but I think that is material to the actual building. And I know it's difficult to get the stages right when it comes to public art. There are instances when we get a presentation to the panel of the forecast, if you like, by the developer of what he intends to do. But that's no commitment. And I do think that people don't probably recognise the very limited amount of money that is available for public art. And when you get quite a major development, there was one in Knightsbridge, and the public art element amounted to £75,000. And what they produced for the £75,000 was some glass, coloured glass, which was very attractive and could be lit up at night. And that actually also was in the entrance to the building. But, people are, I think, under an impression that there is a pot of gold somewhere. And, 9 times out of 10, we're dealing with amounts of money that are under £100,000. There are very few applications that come in with, if you like, £1 million as an earmark for public art. In those cases, then you do get something really well worthwhile, whereas the numerous additions to buildings I do consider to be part of the original architecture of the building and not an add-on or, like the fairy on the Christmas tree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Ball, can I, at peril of the councillor behind me, suggest that in fact the notion of public art is totally misplaced. But whilst what we should have is a public art fund, and this would overcome the idea of just sort of a few thousand on one small building. And if it were an art fund, then a committee to deal with the art fund, which would accrue a sizable amount of money, it would be much more appropriate and much more genuine to the word art and artist.
There's government legislation. We need to check. Yes, exactly.
It seems to me that you must have a discussion with the architect. I mean, so many of these works of art are just slapped on. There is very little genuine dialogue between the architect and the artist. And I think it is just a requirement, and this is why you have so much second-rate sculpture which is just slapped on.
Thanks. I'm Gabby Higgs from the St Marylebone Society. There's a very large public art project about to happen in Marylebone. And it's we haven't seen it yet because it's just an idea, but it's really a substation for the London Underground, a very large generator, which is going to be hidden with public art. And when we were given the presentation, our comments were, it's a shame that a really good piece of industrial architecture couldn't have been built in this situation. Everybody was saying we didn't want a big brick wall, but there are some fantastic big brick walls we can all see in Battersea Power Station or Bankside. It was a lost opportunity that the public art seems to be like a decoration on the edge of what's a basic utilitarian box. I'll wait and see, though. Apparently the artist has a very good reputation, but it did seem that the two things were being treated completely separately, the functionality of the building and then the art was applied afterwards.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything about the technicality of pooling public art payment?
Well, as to the technicality of pooling public art payments, as Councillor Hooper says, I think there are problems, legal problems in doing that. Also, there's then a problem of, even if we could do it, how do we spend that money? How do we allocate it? So we don't do that.
Simon Looms from Portman Estate. I wonder, rather than pooling, whether to encourage developers to be more ambitious in their art where they have an opportunity, and then perhaps give them a credit for that art contribution at some later development that might apply to that location.
Okay, so a credit system against... Okay.
Yes.
There's a gentleman here.
Hello, I'm Paul Williams from Derwent, London. I think the public art thing is a very difficult matter to resolve. Lots of buildings are developed up to pavement line, and I do find a lot of art is just slapped on the building afterwards, a bit gratuitous. And I do support the gentleman's idea of pooling it and actually getting some really decent public art for all the visitors to London. We've got a number of buildings where we want to put some public art, but it's actually extremely difficult. And I totally agree. We don't want it to be canopies to be public art or railings and all the rest of it. They're not really art. I really think the council should look at an opportunity of trying to pool the resources and create some really, really interesting public art for visitors to see, rather than just something slapped on a building that is missed. And I think it's a lost opportunity.
Okay.
I think, actually, just to clarify the situation, I certainly made representation to government some 6 years ago to pool the money for these smaller amounts, and we were told quite clearly that we were unable to introduce this scheme, and that it was government legislation. So we have tried, and unfortunately come up against Gabby's brick wall. But we may try again and see if there's been any change of thought in government at this particular time.
Thank you.
I don't have an answer here, but I just wonder, there are tariff systems in place in other boroughs relating to other forms of community infrastructure, like transport improvement infrastructure, and they seem to operate on a tariff system of pooling of resources centrally and then spending them throughout the borough. I just wonder if that's been looked at.